Welcome to the Weekly Rewind, the show where we look back at the week that was on comicbookcurious.com. I'm Comic Book Curious Director of Content, John Campbell, and your host. I have with me a very spooky panel this week. I say this because we have Kristen with us in her Dracula cape.
That is stylish.
Thank you.
And Brendan, who also has some Dracula stuff with him, as do I.
Yeah, we were off camera talking about how we will be talking a lot about the Lord of the Vampires. So we started pulling off stuff like this is a new Universal action figure of Bela Lugosi's classic Dracula. Had to get it. It's really detailed and nice.
Now it has the alternate head with where he's burying fangs, right?
Yes, which of course Bela never had.
You and I have talked about on our Monsters podcast that he never did actually show fangs as the character.
Yeah, and he also has the Lugosi hands. You can swap them out with the spell casting hands.
Yeah.
I've got there was a limited series that Marvel Legends did, a box set of their classic monsters, which had Werewolf by Night, Monster Frankenstein, Simon Garth the zombie, and of course Dracula from Tomb of Dracula. So 70s,
which people can on the website go back and read your history of all those comics.
Pencil thin mustache, looking suave. And lastly, John, and I know this is the one you wanted me to get to.
Of course I did.
Recent acquisition, and that is the wind-up Count Dracula that poops candy. Yeah, there's the poop hole right there. And I'm glad to be on camera saying there's the poop hole.
I know you well enough to know that's very true.
I don't actually usually say that off of my OnlyFans, but here's the poop hole.
Shout out to that OnlyFans. We'll put the link in the chat.
Please do. But yeah, you put candy in the top of his head, you wind him up, and he walks around, and candy comes out of his butt while he walks. Very true to the original novel. Stoker had this in mind when he wrote that novel.
You know what? Most of the adaptations don't include it, and that's a shame.
Don't include the candy pooping, and I'm like,
shame. Brendan and I we went and saw Halloween Kills the other day. Speaking of spooky movies. But candy poop hole, yes, be lovely. That's true. It was said on this show. But Brendan, on his way to the movie, stopped in a Walgreens and bought that, which meant he had to show the guy taking tickets what was in his bag. And I like you go, it's candy, but I didn't get it for the movie. All right.
I know. I feel like we need to both be very honest and really, the more specific you are, the more people will buy it. But it was the truth. I was not going to be eating the pooped out candy in the theater. I had different candy that I had hidden on my person to sneak into the theater. This was something that I just didn't have anywhere else to put because it was in the little bag. So I'm showing the guy my little digital ticket, and then I'm like, look, you can check the bag. There is candy in it, but it's a little toy that I will not be opening in the theater. And the guy went, I don't care.
Yeah. Whatever, nerd. Go watch your slasher movie.
Yeah. If I hear that thing wound up and walking around, there's going to be a problem. No, that didn't happen. It was
you restrained yourself, at least for the runtime of the movie, from opening it.
Where would you let Dracula walk around pooping candy? The floor of the movie theater?
I haven't let you guys in on one of the best things is that there's a plastic backing that comes with him that is a little tray. So you can actually have him just walk in the tray and drop the candy in the tray so it doesn't just roll off onto the floor.
That's totally
I've now basically done some excellent marketing for whoever made this fucking thing.
Whatever that dollar piece
and now
of
people are like
candy toy is.
I kind of want to get that. And they did have other monsters, but what other one is? Which one am I going to get? Brendan Douglas Jones. He's going to get Dracula every time.
He is indeed. I like that they thought it out and foresaw the trouble of parents with candy everywhere, so they gave the tray. Yeah, and it's like you can only turn that thing on if it's in the tray.
In the movie theater would be a disaster because, of course, it would just roll onto the very, very sticky floor. And I haven't eaten off of a movie theater floor in at least 10 years.
You know what? I'm proud to say that I've never done so.
Well,
you worked in a theater, Brendan, so I think it comes with the territory.
Oh, gross.
you know, sometimes people leave like half a hot dog down there. Are you kidding me? Daddy's got to eat.
Oh,
Those
man.
were my
Brendan,
late teens, early 20s. And no, I did not eat leftover hot dogs.
I was going to say, man, you were giving all the quotes this week. Candy poop hole, daddy's got to eat. I mean, just t-shirt makers.
I am a machine for catchphrases.
I mean, really, you can put those two phrases together.
Oh.
Mhm.
Daddy's got to eat. That's the poop hole right there. Oh. Oh.
Oh,
well,
dear.
we've just lost. I've just seen we've lost all of our listeners. Thanks, everybody. Thanks
I didn't think this was possible, but we seem to have negative viewers. People are actively making it known they're not watching. So
understood.
Let's dive into some of the articles that came out this week. We will work our way up to the Lord of the Vampires. Because we gotta hold on to something for the viewers here.
We do.
But first off, I want to spotlight an article that came out on Monday from our one of our newest writers. We just hired about 3 new writers to the site, so make sure to check out some of their stuff. But from Frank Sama, we have an article here called "More Than a Customer," which is about his 27-year relationship with his local comic book shop.
That is amazing.
That is, I mean, look, I've in like a matter of like 5 or 6 years, I've bounced around to 3. It just happens. So the idea that he has continually had at least some level of patronage of the same comic book store is really impressive.
It really is, and I wish. I mean, both of you would probably have your own experiences with this, but in the case of just because of my life and the way my family moved around, it was always finding the new comic shop wherever we were living. So I've never lived anywhere that long. I'm glad to say that because I'm such a nerd and was pretty much there every Wednesday and sometimes in between Wednesdays, that I did get to know people who ran the comic shops in whatever town I lived in. But I never had a relationship like that where it's like literally, your life is, I know these people, they know what I don't even need to have a poll list. They just like go, yeah, I put aside this thing for you. It's like, yeah, you guys know me.
I've come close to having that in some places, but it's only lasted like a year or so before either employees change or something. And it is cool, though, the times I've experienced that, when it's just like, I distinctly remember going into my comic shop and go, somebody had a mail-in order they had sent to the store for a Hawkman omnibus. I just assumed it was you, John.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's true. I was known as somebody who would buy a Hawkman omnibus, and it's true. So
is it the Jeff Johns run?
It was the Jeff Johns run, indeed, which is a great Hawkman run.
I gotta say, Jeff Johns, that guy could do it.
He knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kristen,
also,
do you have like a store like that, like your friendly neighborhood?
Doesn't have to be a comic book store.
Moved up to the Northwest. I back in Texas, I worked at a shop that sold comics. I mean, mostly they sold games, like tabletop games, war games.
There's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah. They stopped selling comics shortly before we moved up here. But I mean, really, in my experience, it's all about finding a shop that is welcoming to you, because the other shop where we lived was not welcoming.
We talked about that before. I mean, it is true that there's sort of it's a deserved, I guess, stereotype, but generally speaking, the stereotypical old school comic shop is nerd first, and therefore, and of course, just usually kind of not outwardly unfriendly, but just like only the people that are like us are
boys
really
club.
Yeah, boys club, which I didn't want to say that specifically.
And boys club, but also just sometimes you walk in and can see from the layout of how things are, you're not going to get much customer service here.
There used to be sorry.
I was just because there was one shop where like even Josh would go in, and when we first started playing Magic the Gathering, and the people there were just so unfriendly that he's like, I don't want to play there. And it was like, that's fine, and so we found a place where they were just a lot more open to both of us.
Yeah. I love I was gonna say I love a shop where you go like, how in the hell is this place in business? Like,
I know.
it seems like no one's ever in here. There are cranks behind the counter. Stuff has clearly been sitting there since 1985, and nobody's touched it or moved it. Everything's just piled up, and you're just like, how has this place been around for so long?
There are a lot of crossover places, especially back in the day. Specialty stores.
Collector cards and comics was big for a while. You go sports cards and comics.
Even farther back in the 80s, when I was a kid, and was also in Texas, by the way, Kristen, there were stores that did have comics, but I still felt uncomfortable being there simply because they were hobby shops. And so what they really were interested in and selling were train models or baseball cards, stuff I didn't care about. And so the comics section would be pretty weak, but it would have one. And if you're in a small town, it's like, well, this is all I get. It's like, maybe I go down to the Stop and Go, or, and they've got maybe in their magazines, they've got some comics or maybe a spinner rack if I'm lucky. But mostly it's me having to sort of go in and ignore the people that are literally back there just talking sports memorabilia. And I'm like, I don't care. And then I'm the embarrassed guys like going, do you, excuse me, do you happen to have the latest X-Force?
No. Yeah. I went to a lot of those shared ones because those are the ones I could get my dad to go to, because my dad collects sports cards, right? My dad's a sports guy, not a comics guy. So it'd be like, Dad, they have baseball cards and comic books, and so that's how a lot of that stuff is how but also the way I got this job working for Comic Book Curious in a roundabout way is because of my patronage of a comic book store. I used to regularly go to a store managed by our friend and coworker Sean Wynn. Became friendly with him through that. Ended up working for him at that comic book store, and then just stayed friends after that. And then eventually he invited me to come be a director of content here at Comic Book Curious. So
I don't use this phrase a lot, but that's like a fairy tale, John.
I thought so. Yeah. And the
you
happy
really
ending
went on
is
the hero's journey.
Yeah, I was gonna say the happy ending of the story is you are now watching this stream, everybody.
There it is.
We also had on that same topic, writer Brian here had a interview with Bruce Treat, who's the owner of a comic book store here in actually in Milwaukee, Oregon, which is just outside of Portland, and at a place called Comics Adventure, which is a comic shop I've stopped in a couple times. And Bruce is a super nice guy, and they're very welcoming and family-friendly stores. So if you find yourself in the Milwaukee area, I agree with Brian that Comics Adventure is a really cool place run by, and it's the kind of store where he's the owner and the guy behind the counter. So you're just dealing with the one guy. It's not a corporate thing. And it's super well kept, clean, bright,
yeah, that
and
picture
friendly.
Of the interior, that is to me the perfect middle ground, because it does kind of have the mom and pop feel to it, but it is, look at how beautifully organized and bright. That I would love to go there, but Milwaukee's not exactly in my neighborhood. But that's a nice comic shop.
It really is, and they have a great collection of classic books, wall books, and stuff like that. Which I can't afford to have, like a first Punisher appearance, but I like to see it behind glass.
Yeah, I used to have that first Punisher appearance. Let's not bring up what happened to my long ago collection.
Yeah.
Did you sell it?
I had to. It was
to pay for your walker.
Yes. No, to pay for my lark. Walkers are for, I don't know, athletic people. I just go no. When I moved from Texas to California, I needed money, so I went to my local comic shop with my 3,000 plus comic collection at that point, which I had been building for years, and I did not get a lot for it. They did explain it nicely, and I do understand when you sell in bulk, you take a big old bath. And yeah, I don't want to say what I got for it. It did help me move, but it was just me going, okay.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I understand. When I got pregnant with Max, we went through our magic cards and pulled out all of the money cards. And so now we'll be making decks, and it's like, well, we had this card.
Oh.
I recently sold off a good chunk of my comics collection, mainly because I've moved around a handful of times now in the past couple of years, and I just got tired of lugging it from place to place, and I also got tired of seeking out apartments for closet space for the comics boxes.
Oh, yeah,
I
of
thought
course.
that's not a good way to be considering where I live, where I'm like, well, this place is nice, but I couldn't fit all my comics in here. So I've pared it down considerably to
But
like
you
the
were
ones
smart
that
about it,
mean the
right? I
most.
mean, I mean, you probably broke it into attractive chunks
Yeah,
instead
like
of sold it
you
in
know,
bulk.
I was selling it in like this person's entire run of Batman or the, you know,
Yeah,
whatever,
that's
like
good.
in chunks like that. And I kept all the, I mean, like the comics I have a weird comics collection now of like, you know, I have told you about my complete run of Marv Wolfman's Vigilante, Denny O'Neil's Question. I have a lot of like weird, dark 80s DC
To
stuff.
tell you the truth, I think those are the best kinds of comic collections because that isn't, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going with the big names. I mean, certainly if you also enjoy the titles that are the top of the charts, great. But I always love the ones where it's like someone, it doesn't matter about the collectability. Someone is
Right.
buying something that they like. When we talked last time, and I mentioned that when as a kid I bought any comic that had Dracula in it, and there are terrible comics with Dracula in them, but it didn't
Yeah.
matter to me. It was a sort of weird OCD of if he has appeared in a comic book, whether it's a superhero comic, a horror comic, I must have them. And then, of course, I still sat there going, this isn't good, but it goes into the collection. And I used to have like the full run of DC's The Shadow from the 70s, which started really strong with that Michael Kaluta art.
I do have the complete DC Shadow Strikes run from the 80s
that's
and
good
90s.
stuff too. I mean, certainly that was a fine follow-up, but for people who wanted more classic Shadow and less of the weird Andy Helfer stuff, which I enjoyed and winced at, but still mostly enjoyed.
Yeah. Let's we've dug deep on that one. Kristen, do you have any beloved collection kind of stuff like that, collectibles that are just like no matter the situation, you're not going to part with these?
Oh, I know it's your American Girl dolls that you got behind
I
you.
do have them. I've been slowly collecting them for the past year and a half, maybe 2 years. Let's see.
There you go.
I do have some books. Not that I would say that they are worth anything money-wise. They are worth a lot to me because of where I got them and when I got them. So those are the ones I don't sell. Like there was a time where I owned over 1,000 just paperback novels. And again, with the moving and the finding a place for all of the books, you know, I sold them down and now I just have the books that have sentimental value.
Yeah. That's how I feel about my comics trade.
Are you saying you Marie Kondo'd the shit out of your collection? Does this instantly bring you joy? Keep it. If not, get rid of it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not quite on the Marie Kondo thing. I do appreciate that but I'm a pack rat. I mean, you see that like wall behind me, but it just goes all the way around, and I do occasionally have to sell stuff off just because I live in a studio apartment. But
Brendan, what happened? You're muted. 1 second. Technical difficulties from Brendan Jones, everybody.
He was gesticulating so wildly, I think he unplugged his mic.
Sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes you just get so caught up in the moment that your microphone gets ripped out of the plug. Yeah, I sold off a bunch of the trade collections I have, comic books, simply because there's these great digital archives of DC and Marvel these days. So if I can go to a lot of those, and once again, it's just like this is just weight I'm carrying with me. I'm also paring down. This is all I have left of my what used to be a massive film collection of physical media. It's still a lot, but it's pared down considerably because I just don't need it with all the streaming services and everything. So now I'm pretty much only keeping like collector's edition stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah. I did kick my mic's cord out because that's what I do. Actually, the Lark ran over it, so I had to. Don't worry, the battery will run down on it soon, and I'll be forced to stand.
Let's switch over to the world of video games a little bit here, because we do have our regular segment, Games Worth Playing, from our friend Captain Chris. And this week he spotlighted a game called Left 4 Dead 2. I've never played the Left 4 Dead series. Have either of you guys ever played Left 4 Dead?
No, I had a friend who was crazy into it, but I never dabbled myself.
I was gonna segue that into just talking about zombies in general, and your guys' feelings on the zombie subgenre.
Sorry.
Are you guys zombie fans?
I don't really have strong opinions one way or the other. I mean, there's some zombie movies that I have watched and, found to generally enjoyable. I mean, they're not my go-to monster. So
no, same here. Though I definitely went through a healthy zombie phase in high school. Like
I'm just kind of burnt.
That's the thing. There are so many.
Yeah. And you can spotlight the things that are. I mean, there are high watermarks, obviously.
Yeah.
And Walking Dead.
I have all the
comics.
Walking Dead.
And the series for an early chunk was amazing. But
like,
going back to George
I have all
Romero,
the Romero movies. I was going to say, I have all the collector's editions of all the Romero movies. Those are just iconic horror films, regardless of them being about zombies. They obviously kick things off. And then every once in a while, somebody will come up with something like Train to Busan, right? Where you're just like, wow, this is cool. This is unique. Like a new take on it. Because you can always just throw a group of survivors surrounded by zombies. I was into Snyder's movie, Army of the Dead. I thought, like, okay, let's glom another genre onto it. Like now it's a heist movie.
It was popcorny and not one to take seriously, but it had its moments I enjoyed. But I mean, that is the thing. It's really a case by case. Similar to you, Kristen. I'm not as monsters go, zombies don't have personality. What they have is that dread of that is everyone your loved ones becoming a horrible flesh-eating thing. And actually, the things that with zombies, even Romero's zombies, don't fit it. I always love when someone says, well, let's go back to what they originally actually were, which is so rare to see anything that's based in Zuvimbi, to go into voodoo and that form of The Walking Dead, and the whole thing about sewing their mouths shut so that they can't imbibe salt, which will break the spell. That's the kind of zombie I'm always like going, come on, guys. Let's do it old school, because the brain eating and flesh eating, those are ghouls, and George Romero attached that to zombie. So it's sort of like, okay, now everyone thinks of that as zombies, flesh eating undead.
Totally. Right. You want to go back to Bela Lugosi and White Zombie?
White Zombie is batshit. It's crazy, and it's kind of great.
Yeah, I do love White Zombie. I Walked with a Zombie is also great.
I Walked with a Zombie. Great stuff.
Yeah,
I like the zombie from Hocus Pocus. His mouth was shut too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we were talking about your movie Witch List last week on the show, Kristen.
Hocus Pocus getting a sequel.
I know. I'm so happy about that.
Okay.
I mean, it does feel like that has just grown and grown and grown in popularity since
it really has, because I mean, when it came out, and I remember that it was a modest hit and people enjoyed it, but it just seemed to grow. It did. It was culty, and
it's definitely. I mean, it came out at the perfect time in that sense of it became one of those video store movies,
right?
Where it's just like it just got rented again and again by generations of kids, and now they're watching it on Disney Plus and stuff.
You couldn't stream it for the longest time, and then for a while you couldn't even find it to buy, because I remember probably when I was in my teens, like late teens, we were trying to find it to watch for Halloween, and it was really hard to get a hold of.
Well, they had to, there was a lot of legal complications, and they had to edit out a lot of the racism and there was that extremely graphic nude scene. They're like, you know what? That worked in the 80s.
Are you thinking of the same movie?
The one with all the racism and nudity in it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you normally watch, Brendan?
Yeah. Bette Midler saying horrible things. And than singing for the troops. I always thought that was weird that the witches suddenly do a concert for the.
I think you're thinking of the film For the Boys.
Is that the one where the witch is fighting Danny DeVito? It'd be great if all Bette Midler films run together in my head. Is that the one where the witch is a pop star that gets addicted and dies?
And turns into a Stepford wife and then is replaced by a robot.
Kristen, you get it. You know which movie I'm talking about. The one with all the nudity and racism.
You're talking about the one Bette Midler movie that is all Bette Midler movies.
All Bette Midler movies combined.
I will say I am, and this is not to name drop, I swear. This is a actual segue into something, but I'm somewhat friendly with the voice actor Jason Marsden, who was the voice of the cat in that movie. And I will say he at conventions, that is far and away, and he's done tons of stuff. He does DC characters and Star Wars characters, but the cat from Hocus Pocus is probably the big, and he brings the puppet with him to conventions.
Oh, that's smart. That's cool.
Because kids are like, what? But then as soon as he puts the puppet on and talks to the kids, they go crazy for it, obviously. So
nice.
I will say
he actually puppeteer it as well?
No, he didn't. I mean, he's doing the best he can as a puppeteer, but still, like the kids, because it is that classic voice actor thing where like, oh, it's the cat from, and they're like, what? And then he does that, like, oh, and then they light up, So I will say, yeah, that movie, he still makes a ton from that one job all those years ago.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
I got to see up close Tom Kenny get introduced to kids who were in the audience of a thing that we were in together years and years ago, and like the parents asked him first, like, is it okay if we tell the kid you're SpongeBob? And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. So they're like telling their little kids who are on the way out of this theater, like, he's SpongeBob, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, and then Tom Kenny just leans down and does SpongeBob, and just their eyes, it was just like, it was like seeing they just met Santa Claus, but he just didn't look the way they thought he would. It was amazing. They were crying and happy tears of joy.
I have seen many voice actors talk about that when it's like, look, it's, Tom Hanks talks about it, like, it's Woody, and kids are like, just a guy, like
just a guy.
I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't. But then, the voice.
Speaking of Tom Hanks, R.I.P. Peter Scolari. Sorry, I had to throw that.
That was a bummer, man.
Peter Scolari, his co-star from Bosom Buddies back in the day, and a good friend of his, and a fine actor in his own right. Newhart,
absolutely.
Newhart.
And was just most recently a recurring actor on the show Evil on CBS. So
yeah, he was still 66,
I think, 66,
and cancer, just terrible.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
Sorry to bring everybody down.
Many 90s kids may remember him as the father on the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV
show. Yeah, he took over.
Yeah,
when they did the TV show, and great choice, Peter Scolari and Rick Moranis. That's a good trade.
Absolutely, yeah. I was bummed to see that as well. Since we're on the topic of monsters and such like that, I want to talk about another piece we have about a comic book called Something is Killing the Children, which I have to say, what a badass title for a book.
Yeah.
I always love reading Kinsey's young adult like graphic novel recommendations, because normally I'm like, I want to read that now.
Yeah.
She sells that stuff, and she's got good taste as well. Like, she reads a lot of cool stuff. And I know one of her big things is she really wants to take the stigma away from young adult label of something.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy young adult novels. You can't tell, but half of the sentimental books I have on my shelf are young adult, and I still reread them.
Sure.
And I mean, I might be considered a young adult. It depends on who you're comparing me to. But
to Brendan on this panel, but
sorry. I mean, no, I don't see this stigma. Well written, anything is well written. And especially if it appeals to whatever. And obviously the Harry Potter series, which we can talk about the books. Let's talk about them and ignore everything else. Sure. Delightful reads. As an adult, I was just like everybody else, waiting for the new one to come out. I got caught up in Hunger Games to a certain degree, not quite as big, but I mean, these things that are sort of like the big breakthrough series.
Yeah, I just have this image of you in line at the movie theater with all the young people who love the books, and you with the bow and arrow being like, Katniss!
Well, yes. Man, I'm telling you, that third book is a hard read no matter what age you are. You're like going, no! Her sister!
Yeah, it's
okay.
bad news.
I'm all right.
No, and that's sort of the thing where the sophistication in the writing, it really is. It's about the subject matter. To me, a lot of the young adult stuff is just that it's about young characters, not that it's dumbed down or poorly written or written at a younger audience necessarily.
Well, often the language is streamlined to a certain degree, where it's more, I will say it, pure storytelling instead of literature, instead of them like, this is where I'm going to go extremely in depth. They do read fairly quickly, most of it.
Which is kind of what I like, though. Honestly, that's what I look for in adult fiction a lot of the time.
Sometimes when I'm reading certain authors and I have to spend 17 pages on a tree.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have some ideas.
I mean, why?
Yeah, they're the guys who write, as Mike Ergoni would say, books that can kill a man. That's no, I mean,
I'd
there's
love
a reason
to read
I'm
the
drawn to
young adult adaptation of Infinite Jest. I would love to read that. I'm sure that
just zip right through that sucker. Just get right to the plot, man.
Oh yeah, we're at tennis camp. Okay, great. We are moving. Let's go.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, but no, there's a reason I'm drawn to pulp and detective stories and stuff like that. That is a little bit zippier, in that sense. So.
I mean, I'm a writer, but I tend to be story first and character first, and therefore I can appreciate wordcraft where someone is truly a master, and it's like, oh my god, they're painting an entire scene and the inner thoughts of these characters. But generally speaking, I prefer, and it's probably because I grew up reading comics and watching so much TV and movies, I prefer a well done story that gets you in, gets you out. It can still be non-action, it can still just be drama or tragedy or whatever, but conciseness is a strength. So sometimes with young adult fiction, that's exactly what it is. You get the emotion, you get characters you care about or can relate to, and you get a story punched right to the heart, and you don't have to sit there bogged down by someone is really showing off and going, here is language. So I like something in between. Every now and then I challenge myself to read some huge, well-received piece of literature, and then I go, man, get this person an editor.
Yeah, no, I read enough of those well-received pieces of literature back in my college days, and now I'm like, please just give me something with a good story that won't take me 6 months to digest.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, and it helps that this comic, Brendan, is about a monster hunter.
Yeah, I know. I also, as I've said, like Kenzie's article simply because she is talking about things that I probably haven't heard of. Simply, it's not a preference thing about, I don't want to hear about young adult stuff. It's just that it's not pitched at me, and I very often will gloss over. So the way she, with her good sensitivity about something that would appeal to larger crowds, like with Goldie Vance, which she wrote about before, it's like, hey, thanks, Kinsey, because that's a good recommend, and this does sound right up my alley, so of course I'd be reading this. Again, great title too. Something is killing the children. I'm intrigued.
It's a grabber. It's a grabber.
Yeah. And Boom Studios they do good stuff. I've enjoyed a lot of their stuff.
I know Max really enjoy it too. So like that, reading her articles, I'm like getting recommendations not just for myself, but for something that Max and I can read together. So
well, and it helps that in her day job she's a youth librarian. So I mean, she recommends stuff to people in her work.
Yeah.
Zamboni Lass is saying the Hunger Games books were pretty brutal, but the movies really fluffed them up. I do think that's kind of true.
To some degree, yeah.
Reduced it down to the love triangle between Katniss and the only two males of her age group, and who's she gonna pick and what's gonna happen there.
And look,
they were trying to recreate that Twilight thing of team this person or team that person.
There was no question it was it did feel like they were trying to pitch it as post-apocalyptic or dystopian Twilight. And it seemed like that because the posters were all that. It's her in the middle and two hunks.
Like Zamboni last saying, kids were starving those books. And in those movies, I didn't believe they were starving. It's true. They were all looking very healthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean that six-pack on Liam Hemsworth, man.
Yeah.
Six-pack on our lead actress as well.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
they were very
thought
fit.
They
healthy
were well
kids.
cast, and I enjoyed them. But the books,
for the most part, I mean, I have my preference of Hemsworth, and it's not him. But
ooh, shots fired!
Really, I think most people go with the God of Thunder on that one.
He's great.
Yeah,
I agree.
He's awesome. Yeah. Oh yes. I don't think it's the most controversial opinion in the world, Zamboni Lass. After I just look at their careers, is all I'll
it's
say.
Definitely a room temperature take.
Yeah. But yeah, Something's Killing the Children is definitely something I think people should check out, and I it's one of those I've been meaning to read.
Add it to your list, pal.
I will. Segueing out of young adult comics into something considerably more mature, we have KK's piece about the Crow, which I know is a story that means everything to this guy. Just from talking to him, I've been trying to find the right place for him to write his piece about the Crow, and he finally got to do it because he talks about the Crow a lot, and he also put it in our staff Halloween movie recommendations as well. But here he talks about the comic and the movie and just what the story means to him. What kind of are you guys Crow fans?
I watched the first movie, but I've never read any of the graphic novels or the comics about it, so I don't have a strong opinion there. I did enjoy the movie though when I watched it.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
I read the comics when they came out, or at least the first rush of them, because it did have so much buzz as an indie comic when it was coming out, and there were things I liked about it. I will say, in general, as much as I love horror and I love Dracula and so forth and that kind of thing, the goth thing, which really fetishizes, that kind of like it to an extent, both the film and the comics always kind of made me laugh a little bit because it is so over self-serious. And again, my opinion, I enjoyed the comics and I enjoyed the movie. I saw the one, I never saw the others, but it's just so melodramatic. It's like there's never a day in this fictional city that isn't raining, and it's like if the Crow can stand on some sort of building top and just glower and cry, but his tears are mixed with the rain and all that kind. It's just it's a little much. It is. I mean, because he brings up the fact that Barr, the writer and artist who created the Crow, worked in a bunch of Cure lyrics and stuff like that into the actual comics. It's just so emo. It's all so emo.
As Christmas Dracula says on the chat here, such sad boy.
Oh my God, unbelievable sad.
Well, I think that's why on that sense, that's why a little goes a long way for me with it. I do really like that first movie and that first comic, but whenever they tried to keep it going, it kind of made me go like, all right, I get, because the other thing is Alex Proyas was such a great director for the movie, right? The style, the look of it, he did capture so much of that. The flaming crow, which I just remember from the trailers so much. Seeing
Brandon
that. It's
Lee,
been a while since I've watched it.
He was one of those people who, I mean, the tragedy speaks for itself, but he's one of those people that was perfectly cast and someone who believed in that character so much. I mean, it wasn't just him going, this is my shot at the big time. Right. He believed in the character. So one of the big tragedies is that's the best he ever was. I've seen some of his action stuff beforehand, and it's fine. And he's a handsome guy. And
Showdown Little Tokyo, come on, it's a classic.
It's pretty great. But this was the start of something. And if he had been around for a second one, he just would have gotten better and better. You can tell that he would have. So
it's like so many young actors who die. All potential, like a James Dean and stuff like that. It's all about like, oh man, he would have just exploded out of this completely.
Christmas Dracula is bringing up, and that's weird synchronicity. It is true that we're talking about The Crow and a terrible on stage set accident with a blank pistol, and just yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday?
It was the day before. Yeah, it was Thursday.
Yeah, that's where the terrible Alec Baldwin set incident happened, and just it's a nightmare, and it's a nightmare for everybody.
The Crow one was such a freak specific accident that's awful. The Alec Baldwin one, I truly cannot understand how an actual bullet ended up in a gun.
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, on the filming.
Well, no,
it's
exactly the same thing.
Was it the same thing?
Brandon Lee was shot by a live round that should not have been in a prop gun.
It was a dummy bullet that fell into the barrel on Brandon Lee, and then the blank bullet pushed it out. That's what I had heard on that. Whereas in this case, it was on Alec Baldwin's new movie, Kristen. It's a Western, and he fired out of a prop gun. He fired a live bullet that killed the cinematographer. And wounded the director.
So
the director, yeah.
That is a hard. What is most surprising about it is post something like Brandon Lee. Why would this have ever happened? And the prop master was non-union, and we're finding out things where it's like
lots of corners were cut on this set to save money and time. There's going to be
they did a safety check, or at least there was apparently at least a verbal like, "We're safe, right? This is and they're like, "Yeah, absolutely, that one's totally."
Yeah. So, I mean, you rely on those people on set when you're an actor like that you're being handed a gun that isn't going to hurt anyone, and here it's killed someone tragically.
Oh God, I can't even imagine. I can't imagine on either side of it, because Alec Baldwin, how traumatic is that? That's.
I mean, the actor who shot Brandon Lee never recovered basically from it.
Yeah, I mean, how can you, like, when you do something that's supposed to be make believe, and the next thing you know, that's become something that really happened to you.
It's there's a big push now to just ban live fired weapons, period, and only use CGI digital guns.
I mean, it might cost more, but it'll probably kill less. So.
Actually, I don't know if that's even a cost thing. I don't think it's that much more expensive.
And it's true, Zamboni last, that even blanks can hurt or kill people. There was an incident in the 1980s with the star of the star of the show Voyagers, I believe.
Yeah,
was the guy?
John Eric Hexum.
That was it. He was killed by a blank, which was played when the gun.
But it was because he was playing around, and he did the Russian roulette thing. So blanks can hurt you, especially if you put the muzzle of a gun to your head. He fired a blank into his own.
That was a different situation, but still another tragedy. Absolutely.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's. I would not mock someone that happened to. It's just that's unsafe foolishness. And Voyagers.
Yeah, it's greatly unfortunate that there was no way that was not going to come up when that just happened, and we're talking about Brandon Lee.
Yeah, we went down a happy road there.
I know.
About as happy as The Crow.
Well, that's the interesting thing too that people talk about with the Brandon Lee thing as well, and KK brings this up in his article, that there is such dark irony to it being that story about a guy who's murdered. That's where Brandon Lee dies. There's lots of people who talk about the curse of that and things like that. Whatever. I don't know. And they are still attempting to. He brings this up every once in a while. Somebody gets around to trying to do The Crow again. There's a picture of Jason Momoa in there because I believe he's still attached to do some kind of new take on The Crow.
He would be a much bulkier Crow.
Yeah. And he would say, "My man."
He would. I think pretty much he would rise, as now the Crow with the eye makeup from the grave, and his first words would be, "My man."
Yeah. You know what though? He's got the hair for it. I really think that's a big thing for it, right? The long, stringy hair. He could rock that look.
Oh, he
But
would
yes,
be fine. He would be fine.
he would be a much more instantly imposing Crow, though.
It's
Yeah.
impossible to predict public reaction, but the Crow seems to be such of a time period because the Crow, the creation of that character, was right there at the cusp of when grunge starts to happen and goth and emo culture. Not that that stuff has ever really gone away, but if you were to do a straight adaptation of the original graphic novel of J.W. Barr's, The Crow, would audiences go for it, or would it be too goofy? Would they sit there going, Jesus? Because almost all superhero movies that are hits now have a certain self-aware, a little bit of a comedic or sarcastic flip to them. And
I mean,
unless you're Snyder,
the Crow is about as far away from and even Snyder with that last Justice League was considerably lighter, especially by his standards.
I'd say by his standards, sure.
Yeah.
But man, that is a dour bunch of world's greatest superheroes. I'll tell you that much.
But yeah, the Crow is about as far away from Marvel as you can get. Yeah. So let's see here. I want to get you guys to talk about these staff Halloween favorites we have here. Because KK put the Crow down as his Halloween pick.
Yeah.
Kristen, you chose The Nightmare Before Christmas.
I did. I think a lot of that has to do with being a mom. I mean, my husband doesn't really like horror movies. And so when I watch them, I just watch them, by myself on my computer while I'm working. But The Nightmare Before Christmas is one of those movies that it's a little spooky. But it's friendly enough your kid can watch it, because Max has been watching it since he was 3 or 4. So
sure, yeah. I mean, I went crazy for it as a kid when it came out. No question about it.
I mean, I didn't watch it as a kid because Tim Burton is not my parents' aesthetic.
Gotcha.
But when I was older, I very much enjoyed it.
I was as a kid, I was a big Tim Burton fan because being obsessed with Batman. So then it was like, ooh, a new thing from the Batman guy. And it's a kid's movie,
Exactly.
So it was like, I gotta see this. But Tim Burton is one of the first directors I knew because he directed Batman.
Sure. Yeah. And is so distinct.
Yeah. And then also, I also like Beetlejuice, which is, a somewhat of a it's a kid-friendly movie. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I mean, a lot of his stuff leaned that way. Even I loved Edward Scissorhands as a kid, which is darker, but still, a fairy tale in presentation. So, I loved his stuff as a kid. I still see his movies, even though there's diminishing returns these days on some of his stuff. Every once in a while, he surprises me.
I'm looking forward to his take on Wednesday Addams. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I think it's a good marriage.
That seems like an absolutely perfect creator and property there.
Anything with Luis Guzman in it has to be great.
I love the idea of Luis Guzman as older Gomez Addams. Like, that's perfect.
It's great.
That really works. Brendan, are you a Nightmare fan?
Well, I can sing it straight through. I'm a huge fan. I would say, I've always loved Burton. And I love musicals, and I love Halloween, and I love anything spooky, and I love Christmas, and that kind of all of it. It's just a perfect blender. I will say it's a complicated relationship, and only because when it originally came out, literally opening night, I had tickets to go see it, and I was there in line, and that was the first time I saw my ex-girlfriend with a new date. They were seeing the same movie. That colored my experience of seeing it, because I couldn't really watch it without just like constantly darting the eyes. It wasn't good. It was emotionally not such a good. Second time, she wasn't there. And I really
would be weird if she was also there for that. Then it would feel like a message had been sent.
Right. Yeah. Every single film I went to go see, I'm like, God damn it.
How is this possible?
But no, I do. I love it. And I love animation. So all of that, it's
so, I mean, I know, I think there's almost a mild backlash against it these days because it is so oft parodied. The style of it has become so ubiquitous. But you watch that movie and it's a good story, great songs. The animation is so striking and unique.
Yeah.
I feel like when Burton tried to do it again with something like Corpse Bride, it didn't quite land. I don't hate Corpse Bride, but it didn't have the same impact. I think Frankenweenie is underrated though.
Frankenweenie's great. I think Corpse Bride didn't have enough of, well, the there's an iconography to Nightmare Before Christmas, even though you didn't know those characters before.
Right.
They all fit this thing where it is essentially a shared universe of holidays. So you're like going, well, of course you have Santa, and then you have an iconic Halloween type character, and they meet and all that. I mean, it has a sort of kid energy to it. And Corpse Bride is not a bad story, but it doesn't have any of that leavening.
That's true.
To it,
that's true.
It is.
No, the comic relief in that movie comes from the worm that lives behind her eye and the spider. But the storyline is very adult. You know, the whole getting married, being stood up at the altar, buried in her wedding dress.
Whereas
going to a movie, seeing your ex-girlfriend with her new date.
That one would have been tougher. That one would have been even tougher, I think, to watch in that scenario.
Yeah, I went to go see the corpse girlfriend and the corpse ex girlfriend, and not so good. Not so good, that movie. Didn't
no, and I think you're right in that the Night Before Christmas is so universal of feeling like an outsider, feeling out of place in the world, which is something that is, that's Tim Burton's bread and butter.
And it pops and it zings.
It does. It pops and it zings.
It's funny and it's weird and it's great.
Yeah, and it's heartwarming as well. And Danny Elfman's voice is fantastic. He's so good as Jack Skellington, and I like that.
Catherine O'Hara.
Not
only does a great Sally just vocally, but when she sings, you're like, yeah, that lady can sing. Go watch A Mighty Wind. The same thing. That lady can sing.
Mighty Wind is a wonderful, wonderful movie.
I love it.
Okay. Brendan, your pick decidedly less family friendly. You chose appropriately Halloween.
Well, this is what really struck me as funny when you put this list together, and the list was John's idea, I believe, and it was great.
Yeah, it was either mine or it might have been yours, Kristen. I can't remember.
We were talking about people doing Halloween movies, and one of us suggested that we should just have one article where we combined staff favorites.
That is a great idea that we should do more often, just because it's a compare.
We're definitely going to do it again. We're definitely going to do it again come Christmas time with
when the idea came up, I privately, just with chatting with John, I was like, is it too late to pick Halloween? Someone must have already picked Halloween. It's so obvious. And he's like, no one's picked Halloween. I'm like, are you kidding? I couldn't believe it.
I didn't pick it specifically because I figured you did want to do it.
Well,
and I figured somebody else might get to it, but you were in there pretty early.
I stated my reasons there. I think it's I mean, there are scarier movies. There are monsters or nightmarish figures in film that I think leave a bigger impression. But this is specifically Halloween. What I think is great about Carpenter's movie, still to this day, and I will be watching it soon because it's a tradition, is that it isn't just about an iconic monster, an iconic murderer slasher. It is about the Halloween. It is about the holiday itself, and it captures that really well. I love the way it's a slow burn, and you have, it does start with a murder, but once you cut to the day of, and it's just little Tommy and getting picked on by bullies as he's trying to get his pumpkin home to carve into a jack-o'-lantern, and then later when he and Lindsay are in their little outfits, but they're just stuck inside watching like old 50s horror movies and reading comic books.
They're specifically watching The Thing from Another World, which Carpenter, of course, will remake just 4 years later.
Yeah, but no one really remembers that remake. That's a shame. But it's a joke. The Thing is one of the best remakes of all time.
Maybe an argument for the best, really.
Could be. And the original, it's good, but it's 50s good. It's a different thing.
Yeah. Definitely.
So there's just, to me, there's nothing that gets close enough to it. There are kiddish things. I see that a lot of the picks were more younger viewered, aimed things. And there were things I loved when I was a kid. Mad Monster Party, which is the Sid and Marty Krofft, no, not Sid and Marty Krofft, Rankin and Bass,
right?
Stop motion animated movie that they would show around Halloween that had Count Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman and the bride, and they're having a big party on Castle Dracula on an island, and it's just jokes, but it's still kind of cool that the animated cartoonish versions of those characters are all hanging out. There are things I was like, oh, I love watching that around Halloween. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yeah,
love it.
Great.
Love it.
Yeah, classic.
Why are you shaking your head? You don't like it, Kristen? You're certainly allowed to not like it. Oh,
I don't.
Why? You don't believe in the Great Pumpkin?
I have
that specifically, or Charlie Brown in
peanuts
general,
and my relationship with them that I'm not going to share right now. But I don't enjoy any of the peanuts. And
that's what I was going to say. It's not just that one; it's the whole.
No,
franchise.
it's all of them. It's the entire collection of peanuts.
Fair enough.
You have a peanut allergy, is what you're saying?
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you understand.
Understood. Well, that's a shame. Sorry. That's okay, everybody. Looks like other people aren't on board with it. Man, I love it. Yeah, Charles Schultz, I read his biography, and messed up dude. Doesn't matter. I freaking love that comic strip and the animated specials. And so when I think of Halloween, I do think of that as well. Plenty of horror movies, including the one that John picked, is one that I always enjoyed watching.
This is one I've seen this movie upwards of 20 times. There was a period of time when I was watching it every single Halloween, and that is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I just think it's number one. It's the best Abbott and Costello movie.
Yes.
And you and I, it'll be a while before listeners get to it, but on our Monsters podcast, since we have recorded so far in advance, we do an episode about this, and I do legitimately put it near the top of my Universal Monster movies too. I think it's a damn good Universal Monster story that just happens to collide with Bud Abbott and Lou Costello's antics.
Yes. Yes. That's
like the monsters are taken seriously.
The monsters are taken seriously.
Dracula's not cracking wise. The Wolfman is serious. The Frankenstein monster is there. Only Bud and Lou are fun. Like, their story is funny.
They are goofballs that are dropped into a quasi-serious Dracula wants to take over the world with the help of the Frankenstein's monster.
Because, that's the plot of it is Dracula has stolen the body of the Frankenstein monster.
Yep.
He wants to put Lou Costello's brain in it.
Yeah.
Specifically because Costello's an idiot, so he will listen to Dracula.
Right.
And the Wolfman, this is my favorite part of the movie that I still wish there were more serious movies with this plot, is that Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman, has been chasing Dracula all over the world, trying to stop him. So the Wolfman becomes the hero in the story.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
No, it is. It's totally great. I do love it. And there are
neither of the other Universal Monster, Bud Abbott, and Lou Costello movies are that good.
No.
Invisible Man and Mummy.
And I would also say, with possibly the exception of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, there's really not a monster rally film that Universal did that gets anywhere near it.
No.
Because House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, there's a terrible.
Terrible.
Yes, I am in agreement. I Universal, as we discovered going through them film by film, Universal started strong and then almost immediately crapped all over its iconic monsters. We made it, man. We did it. And I agree with your pick. It's a very fun movie to watch for Halloween. But my pick is the only right one because it is called Halloween. It is still scary. It's perfect.
And then the last two things, we can kind of run them together. We have my list of the top 5 monster hunters, which I will say I've never had more. Like, I went back and forth on these so much. Other people were on the list. Things came and went constantly. When I write the top 5s, I do try to get I try to be objective as opposed to my own personal opinion on some stuff. Sometimes it ekes in there. I know some people may not have put Blade on there, but he definitely is on there for me because I do love that guy.
That's not the one I had a problem with.
Brendan, my number 6 that was my number 5 but jumped around a lot was Carl Kolchak. But I thought, like, all right, you old man, you can't put that on there. Like, I could, but it's really getting pretty specific.
I just hate Supernatural so much, and I know that
I couldn't. That was the thing, though, where it's like I couldn't not get those guys on there because they are so damn popular, and I don't mind Supernatural.
They exist. That show is still going on now in its 28th season.
It actually just wrapped up in season 15.
It's just, I mean, and I can't fault people loving a show. At the same time, I gave it a shot when it first aired because I needed a Buffy replacement and an Angel replacement.
Buffy did make the list, of course, the Slayer.
As she should.
Buffy's great.
She is, absolutely. I've got her action figure up there, and she usually stands next to Dracula. But it's and Shaun of the Dead. But yeah, Supernatural was, to me, and I do understand you putting it on that list because you're right. That's a hugely popular thing. But to me, it's weak sauce. It's always been weak Buffy sauce. I just watch it going, well, I see what they're going for, but I don't care about these guys or their father or the dumb monster of the week. And I know that Night Stalker, if you look at those episodes, there's some goofy, terrible shit in it, but Carl Kolchak is a god. So I do understand why you made your list. I just had that one problem with it, Supernatural.
I had a couple other things that I considered. I briefly considered Dr. Sam Loomis, but he really only hunts the one monster.
Right.
Same thing with Rick O'Connell from the Mummy movies.
Right. You could be argued that Ash really only goes up against one, but I love Ash being on there because I love Ash. But
it's a host of things connected to it, right? The other one was I had John Constantine, but I'm like, he's really more of a detective than specifically a monster hunter.
True.
Loomis is objectively bad at his job. I'm not here to, but Chris, you and I will someday have a discussion about how much I enjoy Dr. Sam Loomis. Look, he was a man forever changed by seeing the true depth of evil in the eyes of someone.
Yeah, I'd like to think that he was actually a very good psychiatrist for a long time, and then he just happened to meet pure evil. So that's going to mess anybody up.
But the number one on the list never changed under any variation of it, and that is will lead us into our final topic, which I know we've been promising people we talk about, which is Dr. Van Helsing or Professor Van Helsing or Gabriel Van Helsing or whatever the hell you want to call him, or even it doesn't even have to be him. As I said, there are definitely takes where Van Helsing is a woman.
There's also takes where it's relatives, descendants, so forth. Yeah. There's a whole bloodline or whatever.
There's the Sci-Fi Channel
only Professor Abraham Van Helsing.
Yeah. But I did include a picture of my favorite Van Helsing, which is Peter Cushing.
I can't fault you for that. I mean, I think Van Sloan is great.
I love Van Sloan too, and I love Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins is balls out awesome. I mean, I say it all the time. One of my favorite cinematic moments is just him lifting the severed heads of the vampire brides and going, Dracula!
Yeah.
Chills.
Yeah.
Full body.
I should have grabbed it because I have my Gary Oldman Dracula here, but I didn't grab it. Still on the shelf is my Anthony Hopkins Van Helsing.
Does he have tiny little heads hanging from his hand?
No, he's got a torch.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah. But he's clearly... Anyway, Brendan, let's talk about, you wrote a starter guide for people trying to get into Dracula. Kristen, I know you are quite a Dracula fan yourself, and I almost wanted to set this up as a cage match about how much do you agree with Brendan's starter guide?
I enjoyed Brendan's starter guide.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't read all of the stuff that was on his starter guide. I definitely haven't read many of the comics that have Dracula in them.
Right.
But I was that sort of weird kid in high school who had Dracula on audiobook on cassette, and I would listen to it while I did my sewing.
Awesome.
See, there's nothing weird about that to Brendan and I, but we are also
I say weird loosely because there might be people out there, normal people, who don't.
Well, we're not. Yeah, that's true. But I was going to say, you're talking to two guys who host a weekly podcast about monsters. So,
Kristen, did your audiobook, was it full cast to where when it would skip to Mina, it would be an actress, or when it would go to Seward, it would be an actor or anything?
I honestly don't remember. It was something I got from Barnes and Noble, and I think it was the Barnes and Noble audiobook.
Right.
That might have been. I
was
do
probably
like the
bare
full
bones.
cast
It was
ones.
probably one. Yeah, well, specifically when you have something that's epistolary and is like different characters writing in their journals or letters, it's great when you have different voices for each character. The World War Z audiobook is amazing because Max Brooks, because of his father and his connections, it has this all-star cast. It's like 20 real big name actors reading these little bits from World War Z. It's great. But that wasn't weird, Kristen. I think that's awesome. I was reading, Stoker's book in not even junior high, like middle school, and basically read it every year. It was like every year.
Yeah, it was like a go-to book for me. And then when I started, I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was younger. And my dad looks at me and he goes, "You won't make any money. Pick a new topic." And so I said, "Okay, I'm going to be an English major." And newsflash, I still don't make a lot of money.
So much money.
You made the right choice.
Yeah, I know, right? But I realized that I don't like most literature. I like very specific segments of literature, and Dracula and all of the rest of the sensational literature of the late Victorian era is the literature I like. And so that's what I studied. So
that's your sweet spot.
It is. I liked talking about phrenology and Max Nordau's degeneration and
oh man,
Lombrosian theory of criminology. I have books on it. They're still on my shelf.
Well, I love that Stoker in the novel is trying to be kind of Michael Crichton of his day. He's like trying to pull in all this cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
But it's amazing but it's true of the time, how straight faced people are accepting phrenology in it, where it's like, well, the shape of the man's head. We know that indicates this, and so, and I love cutting edge blood transfusions, yet there's no mention of typing, because Lucy has every single one of her male suitors and Van Helsing pumping blood into her to try to keep her alive. And I'm like going, are they all typo? Are they all AB negative?
It's fine. She's the universal acceptor.
Sure.
Well, we were what were we watching, Brendan? Where they were just bringing in the help for her? One of the Dracula things we were watching recently for the podcast. It was just like all the maids and servants at the house. They were putting blood. Into Lucy
that was Dan Curtis's Dracula, and
that was it.
Character that's a maid who had no line of dialogue, and it's just like, you lay down here and give your blood up to the mistress of the house. Man, that's gotta suck as a job. But anyway, I'm glad to hear that you like the list. There was one that I thought people would call me out on.
Was it the Dracula on the cereal box?
No,
I enjoyed the Count.
I love
the Count Dracula got on.
That's what everyone's expecting, that or the Count from Sesame Street. But
I like him too.
Oh no, I do too. I have a stuffed of him up there.
Me too.
I'm embarrassing. Anyway, but for me, the one that I thought it's divisive amongst Dracula fans is the Saberhagen series, the Dracula tape, and he did like 5 others.
I was not familiar with, Brendan. I will say you got me on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it sounded like something I would enjoy.
Oh, well, no, I want to check it out now.
Like, I read it when I was young, because it did come out in the 70s and it was still in paperback when I was a kid. Early 80s.
The image of it on the article looks like a very 70s paperback.
They have more current ones, but that was the one that I knew from when I was a kid. So I was like, I'm using that cover.
Well,
but
also, I know Dracula of the book has a mustache, but this guy is totally rocking a 70s Burt Reynolds mustache
he's
on
got
the
a
cover.
porn stash.
That's not what I imagine Dracula's mustache looking like.
And he's got like a 70s prom tuxedo on. I love it.
But, it does look like a Dracula is like, oh, you want to party?
Magnum
That's
Dracula.
the thing I love about these English girls. They get older and I stay the same age.
There we go. What? Matthew McConaughey's Dracula.
All right. But but the thing with that is people did find it, Dracula fans in general find it to be a little snarky, a little sarcastic, and a little too cheap, because it does essentially, it's Dracula using chunks of Stoker's novel and then saying, that's what Stoker said happened. This is what really happened. But what I appreciate about it is Saberhagen really does find all these logical loopholes and think Stoker, he turned out a fine book, but you can poke many, many holes. But and so he basically rewrites it. And as far as a take, because the idea of Dracula being a romantic, tragic figure is fairly recent. That's not the way he appears in the original novel. That this book is kind of a, that's why I put it in a starter guide. You could come in with a basic knowledge of the original Dracula story, read the Dracula tape, and see someone twisting it just right to where Dracula comes out the hero. He comes out being this very noble, misunderstood. He is the undead, but he's trying to explain to the Harker's descendants, like, you guys had the wrong idea about me, and I loved Mina with all my heart, and Van Helsing was an asshole. And I don't agree with the take. It's just a fun alternate take.
But I kind of like the idea of that may not even be true either. That seems like a Dracula thing, right? To be like, let me address some of this, and it's like that could also be more Dracula manipulation. It
could be. That's not the way Saberhagen goes.
No, it does. Yeah.
The second one he wrote, the Holmes Dracula file, is also great because that's sheer fan fiction, where it's like that is one of the first novels anyone wrote where it was like Victorian age London. Dracula could have met Sherlock Holmes. So he does. And he's an amnesiac in the beginning of the story. He's just called the Old Man. And Sherlock Holmes is trying to figure out, who is this guy? What's his deal? And then they team up. They also realize they look almost exactly alike, which is a little snarky. But again, that's Saberhagen going, the descriptions of these guys are essentially the same. So it's a fun one. But then
Sherlock Holmes is like the Scooby-Doo of literature, because, you know, there's Scooby-Doo meets the Harlem Globetrotters, and here you have Sherlock Holmes meets Dracula.
Well, essentially also because
he's met everybody.
He's such a huge character in the psyche of the world, and he's public domain. I could write my Sherlock Holmes novel where he meets Barbarella, and I am working on it. But I mean, you could do that. And
I want to read that.
Yeah.
You're not old enough to read it. It gets into some place. No, I'm just saying you can take Sherlock Holmes and plug him in anything. And Gorgoni was the smart ass who last time brought up the Brave Star, Sherlock Holmes in the 23rd century or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I do love that about Sherlock Holmes. He is a utility player. And when someone does it right, like Nicholas Meyer, who did Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 6, the good ones, basically.
He also wrote 3 and 4.
Did he?
Yeah, he didn't direct them, but he co-wrote them.
Okay, well,
don't mess with me on Star Trek trivia, Brendan.
Understood.
That's a losing battle.
Nicholas Meyer also had a long, and still to this day will churn out Sherlock Holmes novels that a lot of people love.
He has one out right now, like it's a brand new one. He has a new Sherlock Holmes novel that I want to read.
And I really like Meyer's Sherlock Holmes. The West End horror. He did his own Sherlock Holmes meets a vampire story, and of course he did the 7% Solution, which became a film, which was equally entertaining as the book.
He also made the movie.
Meets up with Freud, and that's great. Sherlock Holmes and Sigmund Freud. Anyway,
Brendan, I do have to mention, and you mentioned it yourself in here, which is the most surprising entry here is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is my favorite Dracula movie.
I know.
And I see it on here, and Kristen's already shaking her head. Hence, once again, must I bring out Gary Oldman?
I guess you must.
I mean, number one, that armor design is so cool, though.
Okay, and I love Gary Oldman. That's not the problem.
Oh, Oldman's so good.
Kristen, what's your hot take?
That the movie is an injustice to the novel. And
no.
I mean, the casting is fine. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't mind who they cast. And they did the right thing with Dracula aging backwards. And, like that all fit the novel. But then there's the scene of Dracula as a wolf man in the garden.
I do know that scene from the film. I also know the scene from the book. It can read that way because when Mina goes out to find Lucy to find her on the bench by the seaside, she sees a dark shape looming over her. And when she finds and she can't tell if it's man or beast, she actually says that. When she gets closer, because Lucy's basically naked and glowing, because she says it's like there's a shadow and then there's this moonlit person. And when she gets there, Lucy is undressed and, of course, weak from lack of blood. So Stoker is kind of implying that Dracula is doing more than just draining Lucy. It's implied, and I know it's pretty graphically done in the movie. The movie, of course, invents plenty of stuff, like Seward's, he's riding the heroin train. Woo woo!
Yeah, I mean, those were my problems with it, though. And it's not that. I mean, yeah, you could read the scene that way, but and part of that, yes, but I think the implication would have been enough if Mina had found her, after seeing a shadow walking, like running away. Right. I don't know. I didn't like the what's the word? The exaggeration.
Coppola basically took a lot of the implication, as did the screenwriter James V. Hart, who I did meet at a screenwriting conference once, and didn't get a chance to really just go, so why did you do this? But anyway, Coppola basically saw the idea of, let me do a very accurate version of the novel, but heighten all of the stuff that Victorian audiences needed to be watered down. So everything got sensationalized, including the blood loss, including the 3 brides coming up. In the book, they just go, he's young, he's got blood enough for all of us. And, and they sort of lean in, and he goes, my head was swimming, I just didn't know how to handle it. And Coppola's going, he's got a boner. Basically, going, they are going to get on that guy, and it's not just about feeding.
There's no question. It's certainly one of the most, it's one of the sexier things like that. It's also one of the bloodier
and more
ones.
Violent. He just took all the stuff from the novel and heightened it, because he's like, modern audiences need that shit, or else they're going to get really bored.
Sure.
But Kristen, I do
and it was hugely successful. I mean, so obviously people did.
I know. When you read what I wrote in my article, it is surprising I put it on there, but I appreciate,
mainly because you and I have been going back and forth on it for about as long as I've known.
I understand if
I think there's bad casting, some bad casting.
It would have been like a gaping hole in the starter guide, because it is such a current.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a good intro. If you don't know that character, that's going to tell you a lot about Dracula. And I think a lot of people don't want to go back to watch 1931s, and
which I do love too. And you also bring up another one of my favorite ones, which also brings me to Christopher Lee here, which is Horror of Dracula, is another one of my favorite Dracula movies.
I put it in honorable mention because
you did have that in honorable.
It's worthy. I do realize, as a purist, Kristen, I really don't think anyone's nailed it yet. I agree that the book, the classic Dracula, has not been nailed yet, because even Coppola decided we need to include the clear-cut I was Vlad the Impaler thing. That's not in the novel. And I want to include Mina, and this is so tired, but Mina is my reincarnated, past love. And you're like
that, though,
making Dracula romantic instead of essentially a monster who's coming to invade.
I've crossed oceans of time to find you.
Sure,
Dracula is one of the first sexualized versions of the vampire.
Oh yeah.
Before that, it was strictly, almost strictly, a monster.
I don't know, man. You read Varney the Vampire, Varney's getting it too. I think Varney, who predates Stoker, that was a Penny Dreadful series, but Varney the Vampire was a dandy, well-dressed, and basically he worked his way into society, high society, and wooed dames. It just wasn't as, it didn't have the impact, obviously, that Stoker's did. Yeah. So, but you're right. Stoker's was very much like, I want to see how far I can push this idea of there's sensuality going on here.
Yeah, like when he's holding Mina's head to his breast in the book and making her drink his blood, and
it's not like the movies often will do, like, I'm biting my own wrist and here, drink.
Yeah, no, he has her
totally like, go on, baby.
Which Christopher Lee one is it where he does that? And he does open his shirt up and slice his chest open.
That's one of the first times they did that.
Brings the woman. Yeah, it was Christopher Lee did that.
One of the earliest sequels. He does actually open the shirt and slit his chest with his thumbnail.
The difference with him is he is sexualized, that Christopher Lee, but he is not romantic.
Yeah, it is. Actually, Christopher Lee is getting pretty close to the spot there.
That's pretty accurate to the book, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like I said, Dracula, I'm not saying let's push for this, but Dracula, if you're being completely straight about him from the original source material, he is evil. He is out to conquer, and that includes conquer sexually. He's rapey.
Yeah.
Mina is not his great love. He just is like, dude, Jonathan Harker's wife. This would be an ultimate cuckold situation.
You see that a lot with Lee. Remember, you and I have talked about his movies a lot, where it's sort of like he's almost like, you've wronged me. Now I'm going to take your wife. Like that's how I'm going to get back at you.
Your daughter, exactly.
That's how I'm going to get it. Yeah, exactly. He's not. Another thing you have in your honorable mentions that I'm a big fan of, and Kristen, are you familiar with the Anno Dracula books?
No.
I do love the Anno Dracula, which I know why you put in honorable mentions, and I agree with you, is that it stems from Dracula, but it is not inherently about Dracula.
And as a Dracula fan, I fully admit it disrespects the character. I mean, but in a logical way. Dracula wins. So he becomes Queen Victoria's consort. He's known, and vampirism becomes fashionable, and it sweeps the world, and he has power. The problem is that he's just in the background of the stories, and anytime he comes forward, he has gotten bloated because he's gotten soft, and he gets put down pretty easily. And then later books are like, oh, there are stand-ins for him, like any other dictator. He has people who are pretend Draculas.
But it sort of paints a picture of the world colored by
what would happen if vampirism had become a known state.
I like books that do that too. So I mean, I'm surprised you haven't read that one. Yeah,
especially that very first one, because with each successive one, as we move up, it's Kim Newman amusing himself by saying, what kind of world and references can I do? So the second one takes place in World War I, and the references are very specific to that area. He loses me a little bit the farther he goes, because the third one, which takes place in the 60s, is fun, but he's using it he's putting all the characters from Italian film into it of the 60s. So you get characters that are in La Dolce Vita and in Knights of Cabiria and all these things. And unless you're a huge film nerd, you're like, I think he's referring to that character, and you don't quite know.
I do imagine Kim Newman just sitting there being like, ooh, and this and that.
I know.
And I'll
it
throw
is this and this. And his James Bond, also when James Bond comes in, he can't call him James Bond because legal problems. But you know it's James Bond. He's also used as a parody. I think Kim Newman liked doing the big iconic characters and having them end up buffoons, and having the supporting or minor characters that he really likes, he bolsters them into heroes, and you're like, oh, okay, so the one you're excited to read about is an asshole, but the one that you're like, who? Oh, right, that supporting character from whatever, from some old Jules Verne novel will be like the main guy, and you're like, okay, all right.
They're fun. They're very fun. They're very
and
fun.
The references are insane. Like in the World War I one, which has the Red Baron as a main character, there's a mention of Snoopy. I mean, it's not just, he doesn't say, and then I shot at a dog flying in the sky, but you get, it's like, okay, Red Baron, he just did a Snoopy reference, and I dance a little dance, and I keep reading because I'm like, what else did he put in here?
Yeah,
they're fun.
They're fun. They're very fun. I think we've talked about the big articles from this week. I want to thank you guys for coming on. And I want to thank everyone who listened and those who comment or who watched as well. I'm used to doing podcasts, so you can see us.
Oh, no. Good. Wait, you didn't say that they could see us. Oh, my God.
Well, luckily you didn't do anything too embarrassing, Brendan.
Not this time.
But be sure to check out some of the other stuff we have streaming on our Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. You're really committing to this bit, Brendan.
That's what I do, man. I'm going to leave it up here till we're off.
And be sure to check out new articles Monday through Friday on comicbookcurious.com. But that's going to wrap up the weekly rewind for this week. I'm John Campbell. Stay curious, everybody.
Bye.
I'm just hoping someone will actually read my palm.